Coming up, we hear about Christina Haswood about her Kansas State Senate campaign. Plus, the Army responds to a lawsuit challenging how it handles repatriating Native remains. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahan. In January, the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska sued the U.S. Army over how it is handling remains of children who died at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. The Army has now responded, asking the court to throw out the suit. Not so fast, say Winnebago's lawyers. Stuart Huntington has more.
The Winnebago suit seeks to compel the Army to return two boys, Samuel Gilbert and Edward Hensley, home to be buried according to custom. The boys were stripped from their families in 1895 and sent to Pennsylvania to Carlisle, the flagship institution of the government's Indian boarding school era of forced assimilation. The tribe also wants another consideration. It wants the Army to follow the 1990 Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, known as NAGPRA, that spells out rights that tribes have when seeking returns. The Army has said the law doesn't apply. Now they are saying that in a court filing, asking a federal judge to throw out the Winnebago suit. Winnebago's attorneys reject that idea.
Unfortunately, the Army's tradition of ignoring the humanity of indigenous people and kind of operating outside the norms is not new.
An Army spokesperson declined to comment on ongoing litigation, but the Army's legal argument is causing some head-scratching by opposing counsel, who note that the Interior Department has issued a groundbreaking report critical of U.S. Indian boarding school policies.
So it's disappointing that the Department of Interior can take such a stand and speak to their role in this, but the Army can take such a different path, I guess, here. So I think that the contrast is a bit shocking.
Stuart Huntington, ICT News.
Later in the show, Stuart talks with ICT's Mary Annette Pember to get her thoughts on this suit and what it means for other tribes. In Kansas, an investigation at Haskell Indian Nations University has revealed years of sexual assault claims. The Department of the Interior's Bureau of Indian Education conducted the investigation and found the university ignored reports of sexual assault, abuse, as well as bullying and intimidation by Haskell administrators. Beginning in 2021, student allegations were reported to their athletic department, relayed to the school president, the BIE director, and even the assistant secretary for Indian Affairs. But no action was taken. The 80-page report was conducted by 3 BIE staff members who interviewed 34 students and staff between July and November 2022. Wildfires in Western Canada are causing Canadian citizens to flee for safety. The British Columbia Wildfire Service has warned residents of the Alaska highway town, Fort Nelson, to evacuate due to forecasts of an out-of-control blaze. More than 4,700 people have already evacuated after an order was issued last week. According to Bowen Ma, the province's Minister of Emergency Management, Drought Conditions, and no forecast of rain is extremely concerning and uncommon during the wildfires in the region. The nation's second largest reservoir in Arizona has reported plumbing damage. The river outlet works, which are small tubes near the bottom of the Lake Powell Dam, are responsible for releasing excess water. Cavitation or air bubbles causes implosion in the pipes, leading to damage to the protective coating. while the dam is only 30% full. Experts worry that when the pipes are used for overflow or ecosystem boosts, they will continue to break or will stop working. Wildlife and 7 surrounding states rely on the water from the Colorado River and regular drainage from the dam. When Christina Haswood was first elected in 2020, she was the youngest state legislator in the country. She was reelected to the Kansas State House in 2022, where she represented District 10. Now she's hoping to switch chambers and is running to represent Senate District 2. Here's Christina Haswood talking about her campaign and the importance of having young people in the state legislature.
So I am currently the only Indigenous Native American elected official here in the Kansas State Legislature. And I've had a wonderful experience in the House, though in the Senate, I feel like there's a lot more opportunity to be more involved in the political process. And especially with Native American issues, it'd be really nice to have that opportunity to be on the front lines and kind of see those issues and handle them on that side. And to be more involved in the state of Kansas government year round. There's 125 of us in the House and 40 in the Senate. So it's a bit of a fight to try and get spots on interim committees, to be appointed to different types of issue-based committees as well throughout the year. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to be more engaged and to have that opportunity at the state level, but also to represent my community as a whole. I live in Lawrence, Kansas, and the district for the Senate covers most of Lawrence. And we have a really high urban Native American population. I was born and raised in Lawrence, and share similar stories of a lot of our parents in Lawrence going to Haskell Nations University, myself too. And it's just an amazing opportunity to represent the city of Lawrence and all that we do at a bigger platform. So I'm really honored to have this opportunity to be in this spot. So at this moment, looking at who's filed, I'll probably be the youngest in the Senate side as well. Having that lived experience in the Senate, I don't see that represented now. I'm 28, I'm a renter, I have student loan debt. I've worked 4 jobs last year just trying to pay rent. And there were times where I had to go to our food pantry. So these are lived experiences that our elected officials on the Senate side, I feel like, don't really have or hear those issues brought to the table. And I'm really excited to put those issues to the forefront and to be that representative for young folks who really want to live in Kansas and stay in Kansas, but they might not feel like their voice or their representation is held on that side. And the Senate controls a good majority in many legislatures as well. Legislation that seems to be of a priority in Kansas are not the message or issues that young people and young adults are asking for. When we door knock and we talk to our constituents and we interact with them, they're not asking for flat tax. They're asking for, how can I have an affordable way to live here? How can I find childcare and affordable childcare? And how can we live in a more inclusive environment and more welcoming state? One of the big things is environment and the environmental issues that young people are champions of. Not only millennials, but Gen Z are such a loud and presence in our political system, and especially in Indigenous communities, where these ideologies are not being reflected. We're seeing legislation of trying to not progress conservation efforts. We're seeing tribal nations in Kansas promoting regenerative agriculture, but we're not seeing those same efforts and care and time at the state level. So it's really important that we bring these lived experiences and this Indigenous knowledge in these spaces where it could also benefit our state and our community. Legislators don't have that experience, and oftentimes will debate bills, and they'll be like, when I was in high school, but when they were in high school, it was definitely 40 or 30 years ago, and when I was in high school, I wasn't using iPads. So that's why we need these representation and these lived experiences in our legislature, because a lot of times legislators are referring back to their period of time there. And I mean, there's a lot of issues that need that new perspective. I always say having young moms in the legislature is always a win, no matter what political affiliation, because women are underrepresented in legislatures as well. I think Kansas ranks sort of in the bottom half of that representation of gender. Folks who are LGBTQ plus or non-binary and trans folks, there are a lot of legislation against these different types of marginalized communities. And we need that representation. That presence alone in the Capitol is so impactful. And I've seen it myself firsthand that representation alone, that presence alone in the chamber has stopped legislation. So I really say if you have those resources and you have that support, it's really worth putting your hat in the ring and fighting for your community and fighting for the values. Because if you're not here, somebody is, and they're fighting against your interests and folks like you. Oftentimes, we're working on pieces of legislation of like human trafficking, of housing and healthcare, and those have a different, I would say, understanding, especially like I seek services at Indian Health Center at Haskell. So when we're talking about healthcare and when we're talking about Medicaid expansion here in Kansas, as an urban person, that's not being talked about in the committee, especially when Kansas had the abortion amendment on the ballot. What abortion care looks like for Indigenous birthing people is so different than someone who is not seeking healthcare services there. So having that experience and making sure, one of the easiest questions I would always ask as an advocate is this gonna harm or hinder accessibility to Indigenous peoples, Native American peoples? Because sometimes legislation might have unintended consequences. I would just probably add that this step is really exciting and took a lot of thought process. I was asked by the community to take this step, and I just remember back to where I felt like I wasn't represented in government, to the point where I didn't even cast my first vote until I was about 23. And I always thought my vote didn't matter. I feel like I'm a very simple person. When I see folks who look like me and have the same experiences as me, I feel so empowered, and it makes myself think that, hey, I could do that too. And I really hope at the end of the day, whether I win or lose in this endeavor, that I inspire other folks who look like me, who have the same experiences as me, that we belong in these spaces, and that these spaces were not created for us in mind, and that we need to be in these decision-making spaces because we hold so much power, just our presence alone. So imagine how much power and change we can have once we're in these spots and advocating for our communities.
The U.S. Army has just responded to a lawsuit brought by the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. The litigation challenges the way the Army handles the repatriation of the remains of children who died at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. ICT's Mary Annette Pember has covered Indian boarding school era stories for years. Stuart Huntington asked her about the case.
Mary Annette, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Stuart.
You and I spoke with the attorneys for the Winnebago tribe today, and one of them said she saw a disconnect between the Department of the Interior, which is doing a deep dive into the boarding school era, and the Army, which is dragging its feet. What's going on here?
Yes, I think the Army is really very much interested in their internal workings, power, and policies. So I think that's what, in some ways, it's run afoul of that. I mean, they have a certain way of doing things, and they're very interested in maintaining that.
And Mary Annette, why is this suit, the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska suit against the Army, why is it important?
Well, I think it really speaks to tribal sovereignty and the relationship between tribes and the federal government and federal agencies. All other federal agencies have basically been instructed to cooperate and to consult with tribal tribal nations whenever they conduct business, particularly with the business that has an impact on them. And the Army, in many ways, we could see that this is, a disregard of those orders.
And of course, the Army has been part of the boarding school era from day one.
Yes, that's absolutely true. They were very involved after Grant's peace policy during his administration. He recruited former colleagues that worked with him during the Civil War, General Tecumseh Sherman and Sheridan, who, were responsible for this scorched earth policy and strategy that they utilized during their infamous March to the Sea. And they utilized those same strategies against the Plains tribes to ensure that there was opening for Western expansion and also access to Black Hills gold. So it was a strategy to keep the Plains tribes on reservations, and part of the Fort Laramie Treaty that Plains tribes signed indicated that they agreed to send their children to school. And Lieutenant Pratt, the founder of Carlisle Indian School, was ordered by the Commissioner of Indian Affairs at the time, Ezra H., to recruit children from those tribes to ensure that they would, that they would behave, if you will, and the children he described as hostages for their people's good behavior. So very early on, the Army has been very involved with Indians and boarding schools.
And of course, the impacts of the boarding school era are alive today.
Absolutely. When we talk about historical trauma and, the federal policies of assimilation, I think in many ways that we still bear the fallout from that.
And they're alive in your family.
Absolutely. I've just finished a book that I'm writing about my family's survival under the Indian boarding schools, and also sort of a sweeping history. And it's called Medicine River. That will be released next year.
Mary Annette, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Stuart.
A community housing organization might seem like unlikely partners for arts funding, but that's exactly what Duluth's American Indian Community Housing Organization has done. The McKnight Foundation has this story.
Our art carries messages about who we are as a people. It carries messages about the way that we actually see the world and interact with the world. And a lot of times it carries our prophecies and the ways that we can go forward. Anine, my name is Leanne Littlewolf. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director for the American Indian Community Housing Organization, ACO. ACO is a nonprofit organization. We started in 1993 and started with a domestic violence emergency shelter, Dabanugan Shelter, and now we have permanent supportive housing at the Gamaji Mino Bama Dizimin building. So with arts and culture and the work that we do, it was a natural progression because our community is really always doing arts.
Bonjour, I'm Gordon Coons. I'm a member of the Lac Courte Reservation. I do a variety of artwork. Most of my themes come from my heritage. We have a term that we could use for us called Gijibajanoman. We tell stories. It's our cultural stories that we bring out. We want to share those with you, not only with elders, but it brings up the children to knowing that they have a path to follow, protecting and taking care of the tribe. What I enjoy about ACO is one is they're very supportive to all levels of art. Today you'll see my work, which is like about 21 pieces. The other individual I'm shown with is Steve Standing Cloud. This is his first show, so it's kind of interesting to see his new work coming out.
There's actually no word for art in Ojibwe language, Art to us is in everything that we've done. It's in our ceremonial pieces, it's in our clothing, it's just part of our spirituality.
So every time the artists come and do an art show, it's a teaching. I've been to art shows here at ACO that have really expanded my thinking. I become a better human being after that experience.
It's a fun thing, and it's nice to go out there and communicate with people. And some of the works will bring new ideas that are actually old ideas that people are not aware of. If we do historical works, you'll find out what made this country a great place, and then what made it there was what we contributed to the country as Native people.
The value of finding ways to be really visible is because we have been invisible for so long. There's this idea that we don't exist anymore, but we're still here. And I think that nationally that's been for tribal people to say, we are here, we survived.
And we just need to get out there more often, and ECO provides us a place to do that, and that's always what we're looking for, is how to get out there.
We need to really showcase our strengths, and I think that it's something that's beautiful, and I think it's something that the world can really learn from, and I think it's inspiring.
Today, my daughter's watching. She knows who she is, and she'll know where she comes from. Looking at some of this artwork, this is who she is, and I think that just by passing that along to some of our young people is pretty motivating for me to continue on.
We have a lot of people who don't grow up with traditional cultural practices. Those are the missing pieces, and we are putting those back in place. And when you have your whole self, just think of all the things that you can do.
A pilot program to address the challenges of addiction and homelessness launched on Montana's Flathead Reservation. People committed to recovering will be offered housing and support services to keep them sober and off the streets. Liz Dempsey reports how the program is already making a difference.
The Recovery Village opened with the celebration of its goal to help individuals and families struggling with addiction and homelessness. 28 housing units are designed for those who are committed to recovery and need a sober home to live in. Next door is the Recovery Village Hub, which provides a number of support services for addicts. Director of Hub Recovery Home, Tony Myers, says the center helps people help themselves.
We provide group meetings, recovery meetings. Recovery is different for everybody, so we have lots of different services that we do provide, lots of different recovery avenues that individuals can find their own path, find out what works for them.
Drug and alcohol counselors say their clients were having a hard time staying clean and sober because they were living with people who were still using. A lot of people come into recovery leaving an old lifestyle behind them, and that is the only life that they have ever known. The Salish Kootenai Housing Authority partnered with Never Alone Recovery Support Services, or NARS, and CSKT Healing Courts to develop the Recovery Village. Executive Director of NARS, Dawn Roberts, said addicts need a sense of safety and security when in recovery.
We're going to make sure you're not hungry, you got a roof over your head, we're going to help you find work, we're going to get these little basic pieces of the hierarchy taken care of, and from there the social learning component comes in, the peer support.
Alcohol and drugs can play a big role in pulling people away from their culture. Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribal member James Big Beaver says being in recovery has encouraged him to get back to his roots.
On the reservation here, I did grow up traditionally, so pretty much I wanted to get back to my dances, our medicine dances, our lodges, and just get back in there, and hopefully everybody will get back into what we knew.
Recovery Village residents are already looking out for each other. Bo Miller witnessed drug activity in the community and did something about it.
We had a Jeep from Idaho come in, and I seen a bunch of traffic in and out of one of the houses that ain't one of the residents yet. We turned it in and we got 300 fentanyl pills off the street, a bunch of meth, so that was awesome.
The founders of this recovery village would like to see this idea taken up across this reservation and others.
Long-term goal is really get our program development really situated away, and then per invite, go out to other reservations and other communities and show them how we did this and just offer that technical assistance.
The program also hopes to expand outside of tribal membership and offer services to all who struggle with addiction and want recovery. Reporting for the ICT Newscast from the homelands of the Silis, Calypso, and Kasanka people, I am Liz Dempsey with the University of Montana School of Journalism.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.